So, hi everyone, and thanks for joining me, Laura Banks, head of Birmingham Office Wills Trust and Estates team, and also Beth King-Smith, who is head of Disputed Wills Trust and Estates at HCR. So, Beth, you and I have talked before now about issues with particular probates, but have you seen any general trends over the last 2 years in disputed wills generally?
Hi, thanks, Laura. Yes, I think unfortunately we seem to be seeing the same trends that prevail in this area, and that is often warring siblings. So lots of cases on my desk do involve, unfortunately, situations where siblings are made executors, or maybe one of them is an executor, one of them is a beneficiary, and they have bitterness going back years, and it basically just becomes a forum, the will dispute rather, I should say, becomes a forum preventing that sort of sibling rivalry that's gone on for many years. Another key trend, unfortunately, which is also quite prevalent, is that of blended families. I think nowadays we all know from our own circumstances that families are not as neat as they used to be, perhaps, and you have different relationships and different parties. So one of the other things we see quite a lot of is perhaps second wife versus children from the first marriage. And if the person who's the hook that links those groups of people together dies, that can go quite badly, we find. So those two trends do seem to be prevailing amongst the sort of newer ones coming along because of the pandemic.
But have you noticed anything particular clearly with the pandemic, we've had the various lockdowns. So has that changed anything at all?
Yes, I think we have seen quite a few changes during the pandemic. One of which is that perhaps you'd be better to explain is the legislation brought in by the government to allow individuals to sign wills over video conferencing like we're doing now. So I think that's more your bag than mine.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Beth. So the regulations which came in July 2020, and they've got a really long name, which regulations always have to have, it would seem. But before they came in, when the lockdown hit, we were all sort of sat there thinking, well, we can't have meetings anymore. Everyone's got to stay at home. How are we going to make sure that everybody has a valid will? Because, as you know, one of the requirements for when you sign your will is that I, the person making the will, sign in front of two other people who are present at the same time and watch me do it. And then so we all watch each other signing. But after a long period of just kind of managing however we could, what the government did was bring in some regulations which backdate to January 2020, and actually they're effective for 2 years, which at the time you think is way too long, but the way we're all going with second waves and third waves and so on, I still hope is too long, but who knows. But they essentially mean that instead of having to all be in the same room, you can all be on a video call like we are. So you and another person watch me sign, and then I post the will to one of you, and then we do a video conference again, and then we watch you sign, and then you post the will to the next person, the last person. So you're having 3 separate video meetings, hopefully with the same document. So that's what the regulations have allowed, which is really new and quite technologically advanced, but questionable for various reasons.
Yeah, and it was hailed at the time as very forward-thinking, but I think perhaps it was slightly a knee-jerk reaction. On the one hand, it seems a really good thing, embracing the technology. Of course we shouldn't be stuck in the past. But back to your original question, was what problems has that presented? Is questions of validity. So when you have a will, obviously you want to make sure that it's valid so that your wishes are carried out. And the problem we have, and I'm finding now a few cases on my desk coming through these video witnessing, the problem is that if, for example, who else is in the room? Like I'm talking to you now, you can see me, we're not in the same location, I'm in the meeting room, but there could be anybody behind my screen here, and you can't see that. So with families in lockdown, there's been a rise of family members, unfortunately, applying pressure, but more than pressure, undue influence to elderly relatives who perhaps aren't that familiar with the technology in the first place. So it's very difficult to know that you have actually got a client on their own when you can just see one screen and somebody's face. So that, I think, does give rise to lots of concerns of family members putting undue influence on elderly relatives to sign wills to benefit in their favour. So that's a big concern. The other concern is, like you said, about the need to post the will then to the other parties, and you get technological glitches. Like sometimes these calls, they just stall, don't they, for a moment? You know, and you miss a key bit. So if that happened, you know, could you say you've actually seen it if you'd gone blurred for a moment, for example? And then what happens if you send the will and then you die in the meantime? So with deathbed wills where people are very ill, somebody could do that and they post it, but between them doing the video call and posting the will to the witness, if they die, that causes problems too. And then there's a question of just identity. I've got one case on my desk at the moment where my clients who were the original beneficiaries say that a will was created completely with a fraudulent identity and it wasn't the testator at all.
Wow. So they really got the wrong person. So someone was pretending to be the one making the will and it wasn't them at all.
And that's the thing back to due diligence. I mean, if clients go to new solicitors they've never used before, solicitors do really need to be careful to make sure they are doing the will for who they say they're doing. So it's back to how do you ID your clients and taking those due diligence steps as to making sure the person you're speaking to is actually the person who is intending to make the will.
Yeah, I agree. And I know that the Law Society guidance on the video witnessing says that the government guidance is still that if you can make a will in a conventional way, you should still do that. Mm-hmm. And for example, through lockdown, we as a department, we don't trust the video witnessing. It really is complete last resort. So I mean,
how have you been getting around it then? I mean, what did you do during the lockdown?
Yeah, we've still achieved wills being signed in the conventional way by, for example, in one of our offices, we put a gazebo up in the car park. So that provided, protection from the elements, but you still got the fresh air, so you can social distance and all the rest. So you can do that. I mean, I've gone to clients and I've sat on the drive, they've sat in the garage, I've got rained on, they've stayed dry. But, at least you can see things still, or, over car bonnets or through car windows, because the key thing is to maintain a line of vision. So as long as I and another witness can still see them, but we're still, distant, then we've been able to achieve it. But, I've sat outside on a terrace and looked through the open patio door. So you can still achieve it even for elderly clients who were shielding. You wear a face mask and all the rest of it. It is, yes, a risk, but we took the view that the families wanted to make sure that the will was as valid as it could be, and that video witnessing really wasn't the way to go. So that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I've been talking to other colleagues and peers at different firms and barristers and things. It's quite a small world. So just sharing people's experiences. And we do think, unfortunately, there will be lots of cases coming in the next couple of years where people have made these wills during lockdown, and we think there'll be lots of questions as to arguments about validity of a will, and I think undue influence, the ones we're most worried about. So in terms of takeaway and top tips, my top tips from a disputed wills side would be, if you have made a will during the pandemic and you resorted to the video witnessing technologies, then just go back to your solicitor that you made it with and just say, can I just come in the summer and sign, so that it's done in the conventional way, because it is absolutely a last resort, shouldn't be the go-to option for ease. And I think that would be my top tip. So it can avoid a lot of heartache after the event. So please do go and re-sign your will.
Yeah, and I'd say my takeaway would be always use an expert, a qualified solicitor, ideally, to take instructions and to challenge you on why it is you want to do whatever it is, and point out the pros and cons of the different options. And that doing it that way can hopefully make sure that your wishes are upheld, but
Yeah.
you really want to limit the grounds for challenge and basically make sure you've got your affairs in order. Then you don't have to think about them and you can just get on with your daily life. So I think there are lessons that can be learned from this lockdown, not just about wills.
Great, thanks so much, Laura. It's been really good to talk.
Lovely to chat. Thanks, Beth.